from Worcester. It's pronounced Worcester up there, not Worcester. But if you go to Dorchester, Massachusetts, don't say Dorchester or Dorchester. It's actually Dorchester. So just a little pro tip if you ever join us in Massachusetts for some fun stuff. I'm the former Chief Open Education Advisor at the United States Department of Education. So I got the opportunity to spend 1 year working for both Secretary Duncan and Secretary King in expanding and accelerating the use and prevalence of open educational resources in K-12 schools across the country. So much like what you're seeing happening in higher ed, where the cost of textbooks are rising incrementally at a rate of inflation that is mind-boggling. We're looking to higher ed to kind of support us in this journey, learn from what they're doing, and a lot of their faculty members are starting to create courses that are more cost-effective or carry an open license. Rhode Island a few years ago, I think it was just about a year ago, put in a program from the governor's office to support almost $5 million in savings for students in Rhode Island for their textbook costs. I work at an independent boarding school. All of our students are on the hook for their textbooks every year. Sometimes that can range between $1,400 to $1,800 per student per year. So that's one of the things we're going to talk about. I'm also the author of the One-to-One Roadmap, Setting the Course for Innovation in Education. I wrote this in 2014 as the result of my work at Burlington Public Schools in Burlington, Massachusetts, where we launched one of the first large-scale one-to-one iPad initiatives in 2011. It currently has 1 5-star review on Amazon. It's from my best friend. So if you want to pick it up and look at it, it has an iPad on the cover and it has nothing to do with technology. It really focuses on what happens when you bring a disruptive device, a personal device, into a school like an iPad, give it to every student, and then learning is supposed to happen. So it takes you through that whole experience. So it's more about school culture in the context of a disruptor like an iPad in the school. I am a Participate author. So Participate Learning just released some courses, some self-paced courses that are available. I did a course, and I'll share this with you later, about open educational resources. So if you'd like to check that course out, bring it to your faculty. That is available, and I'll share that link at the end. And then I'm Andy Civic on Twitter. I'm also here with a friend of mine who took over the work of the open educational resources at the Department of Ed, Christina Ishmael. And I'll let you say a little bit about you. This is kind of, she wasn't on the program, so this is a special treat for everyone. Like, to get us both in a room at usually it's really expensive price tag. You get us both in a room. So you guys really got the session of all sessions today. So tweet that out.
Especially because we work with the federal government.
Yeah.
Hi everyone, my name is Christina, and I'm a fellow at a nonpartisan nonprofit in DC called New America. And I'm there as a fellow in the Public Interest Technology and Education Policy team. Much like Amy said, formerly at the U.S. Department of Education, and prior to that, I was at the Nebraska Department of Education as the digital learning specialist for the entire state, and then I'm a former classroom teacher. So went from classroom to state with a 30,000 foot view to federal with a 100,000 foot view, and now get to work in policy and all around continuing this work with pre-K-12 open education.
Okay. All right, so we have some goals for today. I would kind of like to set the stage with some goals and kind of where we're going, and hopefully we all get the most out of this. So one thing we want to do is define and identify openly licensed educational resources. So what are they? How do you find them? What do they look like? We'll talk a little bit about that. Identify problem sets and solutions through case studies. They're not essentially case studies, but more like stories from districts who are trying to make this transition. Understand why OER is important and why various schools choose to do them. So really looking at the why of all this. Why do we need to shift in this direction, or why should we shift in this direction? And then one of the goals is to share confidently. So one of the founding ideas of open educational resources is sharing. Sharing resources not only across our school district, but across district lines, across state lines, across the globe. So really, thinking about how we can share, because I think a lot of us who work in education have had experience or work in silos. And I think open educational resources and thinking through interdisciplinary work can really do some really great things. You can really spark some ideas when you're sharing, not just with your own department, but thinking of like how math and science can collaborate, how English and history can collaborate, and even how English and math can collaborate. So I think open educational resources really lends itself to that. So I'm going to do a little poll everywhere quickly. And I want to go off this question. Just give me 1 second here to launch this. So if you haven't used poll everywhere before, you can access it one of two ways. If you have a cell phone, you can just type in the number 37607 and then text Andrew, MARCIN 160 to that number. Or you can go on any device that has a web browser, and it's fullev.com/Andrew, MARCIN 160. And so you can access it to one of two ways. And what I'm looking for is, what are 3 words that come to mind when you hear the term open educational resources? I'm always interested in kind of what people's initial perceptions of this term is, because over the course of the last 5 to 10 years, this term has been kind of shifting in its definition. People think of it in different ways. They contextualize it differently. Some of it thinking as generic. So thinking about what are the first things that come to mind when you think about open educational resources. So I'll give you all a few minutes to do that, and then our responses will pop up here in a nice little word cloud, and then we can have a conversation about that. All right, so we've got a lot of good words up here. It's always interesting to see what one is the most common one, and usually free is the big one. I saw Wild West. I think that was a combination, so I want to make sure those are separate and not another one of Kanye West's kids' names. Oh, thank you. Generic, important, accessible. Accessible is a great word as far as what you can do with open educational resources and creating resources that are born accessible and not having to be retrofit for some of our students that need the most accommodations. Confusing, yeah, I agree with that. I think they are at this time kind of confusing. There's a lot of different, definitions. But this is a good way to kind of get that conversation started. All the expensive. Curious, who? All right, say a little bit more about that.
Sure, I think creating good open educational resources is not free.
Yes.
And maintaining good open educational resources is not free. And there are costs somewhere, whether it's individual time or whether it's systems time to maintain and point people towards and develop. Right? So
I think that free thing is the one that most people think of.
I know.
Absolutely.
Which is why I also put disrespected.
Yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. Well, and those are. Jeff just got to my next 3 slides, so that's great. Anybody else want to comment on one of the words they they shared and maybe why.
I wrote didn't capture my question mark. I wrote there after the word quality. But,
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Right.
I think I have a sense that because things are open, we have regulatedness, like unverifiedness, sort of like questioning, how do I do this?
Yeah,
I think there's like, how do I get good stuff for the best, whatever.
Well, and that certainly comes from a lot of the administrators I've talked to, because it doesn't come from a recognized publisher.
Right.
Somebody with editors, somebody with, well, it had somebody with, unnamed.
Review.
Yeah, there's a lot of unlearning that has to happen within this, and a lot of unpacking, because much like we talk about our students kind of being used to a system of school, I think as faculty and as department heads and as instructional leaders, we're also become part of that system that essentially there's 3 publishers that oversee most of K-12. It's Pearson, HMH, and McGraw-Hill, and there's 2 states, California and Texas, that vet for quality for most of us. So that's a big problem. So that's something where I think you're right. Quality right now, Christina and I always used to talk about this, and we said, like, wouldn't it be great if we just had this Spotify and Yelp mesh together for open educational resources? Done. Problem solved. Someone created it. Because one of the problems we see is that you have all these disparate systems of OER. You can find them in different ways. You bring them in. The problem is that you have also reviews and ratings that are variable across the way. So there's not just one system. So in my thinking is we almost get to flip that system and really kind of have a singular node of some sort where there's a lot of sharing and there's a common paradata that is going to be going with that. I promise you I'm not going to talk about meta or paradata ever again for the session, because I think it really...
I had to explain that the other day.
Yeah.
It was really fun.
I would love
Oh, yeah. The analytics of the use of metadata.
That's pretty meta.
Yeah.
It is very meta, right? There you have it. It's the analytics of those keywords or those tags.
So, not too much. So, what we're going to talk about a little today, and I'm going to do a little just up front, kind of helping guide you through the identification, the definition of open educational resources, and then we want to kind of really get into that, why for your school, thinking about the how and how we're going to do it, thinking about the what and the who are going to be a part of that. And along the way, we're going to kind of design and kind of, in our tables, put together our own kind of Shark Tank presentation of what this would look like, or what you would foresee it look like based on the collective ideas at your tables. So, kind of going back to what Jeff was saying about, something being open doesn't exactly mean it's going to be free. And so when we talk about something, being open, Karen Cater made a great comment. She said, when something is open, it's free like a puppy is free. Okay, and this is where I put the cute puppy on the screen and I carry with me everywhere I go. It's like in every slide. But what that means is, it's kind of like what Jeff was alluding to, is that yes, the content is actually free. Like, you don't have to pay for things that are openly licensed. This presentation did not cost you anything. But think about that, you take this presentation, which has a CC BY license on it, giving that over to you. How are you then going to bring that into your faculty and staff? Imagine that times curricular units and individual units of study. Who's going to be vetting that every year? Who's going to be maintaining that on the technical side? So there are a lot of pieces that are going to require you to shift the economics of open education. A lot of schools' budgets need to be completely rethought in the sense of how they purchase curricular material. Right now, there's a lot of rubber stamping. Budgets are really strained because textbook costs are so high. There's a school in North Kansas City that we talk about a lot, and we profiled at USDOE. For next-gen science standards, they were going to spend $600,000. That's what they had budgeted for science curriculum. $600,000. What they ended up doing was budgeting $65,000, and they were able to support. They actually printed out the resources. They paid for teachers' time. They brought them together to collaborate and find and curate resources, organize them, align them with standards, both program D and program wide, and paid for some of the instruments that go along with science, like the probes and the different things they need to pay for. They did this over the course of several years. So $65,000 a year they spent on that. They never even got close to that $600,000. But the most important thing within that work is that they owned the content. It was locally controlled by them. And it really was reinvesting in the teaching profession in the sense that the school was now putting money into the best return on investment you can put into a school, and that's the teacher. And preparing them and teaching them and really getting them understanding of the content and the resources so that they can teach it in a lot of new ways, as opposed to a scripted textbook that really is just kind of, you open on page 1 and 182 days later, you're done and learning happened. It was very linear and nice and a bunch of tests, and now we're going off to be somebody else's problem. So that's where we are with the kind of the economics of open educational resources. I used to always give this example of my students when I had them create a presentation of some sort, and they'd all of a sudden run to Google on PowerPoint and put it on their blog and then not even know where that thing came from, or that there was an author out there that eventually created that resource. So I think a lot of us with the internet, free is assumed online. And it's not really what we're talking about is not being free, but we're talking about open. It's free plus permissions. And those permissions we think about are Creative Commons. So for example, this presentation that I gave you with a CC BY license, what that means is I'm giving you permission to use this presentation as you wish. If you want to go out and start a consulting company based on this presentation, all I ask is that you give me credit. If you want to go and remix this and take this to your next faculty PD day, or take it somewhere where you may get paid to present, you can take this and you can change some of the stuff. I'm giving you permission. All you have to do is give me attribution, give me credit. Okay? You can reuse this in any way you want. So you can reuse this presentation over and over and over again. What else?
Including the puppy picture?
Including the puppy picture, yes. You can use the puppy. I haven't named him or her yet.
That's what I see a lot in the Creative Commons presentations and things, is that they reuse somebody else's thing and are now redistributing it without actually saying that original material can be reused.
Right. Yeah. Teachers pay teachers, for example.
Yes.
I'm not going to go down that pathway, but because I get hurt. So basically me giving you a very liberal license, a CC BY license. Now there are very restrictive licenses that have these different symbols that you see. So share alike, attribution, remix, reuse, non-commercial. So you can build different layers and different kinds of Creative Commons licenses. And creativecommons.org is a great way to kind of a good primer on understanding that. How many of you are classroom teachers? And how many of you go over this with your students, Creative Commons? Do they know a little bit? Yeah. And I think that's an important thing to get across to students, because they're also creating work that is by definition copyrighted. And then where does that go and how can they use that? So really
it's also important to get over the teachers too.
Sure.
So when we do professional development, we try to make them understand that, first of all, there is such a thing as fair use.
Mm-hmm.
This is a way of extending that and making it easier for you to find and use materials.
Yeah, and there's a lot of debate and a lot of kind of gray areas around fair use too. And I think what this does is really kind of clarify a lot of those foggy areas. So when we think about the internet, it does a lot of great things, and it enables, and copyright forbids. So we have this great platform for sharing and accessing and posting information. But a lot of times we run into copyright issues and we can only do so much with those things. So where the internet enables and copyright forbids, we want to get to a world where the internet enables and open permits. So open allows us to really go forward with a lot of this stuff. And a lot of this work is, to give attribution, is a lot of it's from David Wiley, who is out in, he's at Lumen, Utah. He's from Utah. Lumen Learning, and a lot of this, work he kind of started. He's done a lot of research in the higher ed space on this. I still think what needs to happen is a lot of the research that needs to be done in the K-12 space. There's still a lot of research and a lot of questions that are still lingering around this space. So to give you kind of an idea, to really break down what I just said, when something is open, it is free or minimal cost, print costs, maintenance costs, some other things. It carries an open license, so Creative Commons or something along the way. Flexibility, very flexible, generally licensed to allow free and repurposing for others. An example where you can find something that's open is OER Commons. OER Commons has been in the game for a while. Lisa Patrice and Kisby work. They not only do research, but they also they've been working in this space for quite some time. Something that is free, cost is free, but it might be copyright restricted. So what does that mean? It's limited availability to use and repurpose without permission from author and creator. So something could be free. So I think a few years ago, Michelle Obama had a program that they were doing. I can't remember the name of it, but it was essentially something that was free, but the content was from Pearson and McGraw-Hill and a lot of those pieces. So they were built into a free access point, but it really limited what they could do then with that content. So what I said to you do with this presentation, being that it has a CC BY license, if something is free but it has proprietary material inside of it, that means you're very limited to what you can do. So you can't go and start a consulting company based on that work. You can't go and take that work and remix it and share it at an event where you might get speaking fees. Smithsonian Learning Lab is an example of that. And then something we deal with a lot, proprietary materials, textbooks, variable cost, copyright restricted, and then commercial publishers textbooks. So many of the textbooks we're used to fall into that category. And it's interesting because there was a slide that David Wiley used, and I don't have it on this, but I used it in another presentation, where it had kind of breaking down the costs of all this stuff and what you get. And a lot of times too, we assume free is online, but we also assume that things are, we can just do whatever we want with them if they're online. It's on the internet. It's the Wild West. So you talk about what you get with Netflix subscription. So you get Netflix, you have access to like 50,000 streaming movies and TV shows at a cost of $7.99 a month. You have Spotify, where you pay $9.99 a month. You have access to millions of songs streaming at your fingertips. And then they had a book, a biology textbook. One textbook, and the cost was $28 per month for using that. One. So when you think about that, you think about I always remember the guy at Blockbuster who laughed at the guy at Netflix saying, "Ha, have fun with that. We're a machine. No one's gonna touch us. It's a great Blockbuster." We all know what happened to Blockbuster. You think about the music industry with Napster and a lot of the peer-to-peer sharing things came out. That industry was disrupted. The movie industry was disrupted by, and TV industry was disrupted by Netflix, by Hulu, by a lot of these streaming services. Think about education publishing and textbooks. It really hasn't been disrupted. It's really kind of sat by, and we've all kind of watched it just come and go, and we all just assume that it's valuable, real, and it's great. So one of the things we're going to talk about today, and we're going to get into groups a little bit, and we can start to sketch some of these ideas out. We're really thinking about the high impact OER adoption. One thing that it will do at its level will improve affordability. So you will save some money, but you will repurpose that money to get a better return on what you're actually putting that money to, as opposed to a static textbook that a lot of times you're locked into 5 or 6 years, depending on the contract. It invigorates pedagogy. There's a session happening simultaneously. What's it called? It's the students.
Oh, the think tank?
No, the students' curriculum.
Yeah,
Is that
think tank, yeah.
Where students are actually starting to create the content, creating the curriculum, creating the questions, creating those pieces. Improves student success and does it at scale. So if you're thinking about how I want to approach this, a high impact OER adoption, these are the things you want to consider. These are the things you want to kind of have as the forefront And that's maybe where your why will fit into and how your why will develop. So the first question we're going to do is, I have these great easel paper and here, and then markers. So what we're going to do is kind of, who's ever seen the show Shark Tank? Okay, I love that show. I love it because it's a great way just to pitch ideas and just to pitch like, here's what we're going to do, and here's why, and here's how we're going to do it, here's what it's going to cost, here's who's going to be involved. And so I like to run this kind of this exercise and thinking through, okay, imagine you were on Shark Tank and you had to pitch open educational resources to, you know, the 5 or 6 so folks up in front of you. You know, how would you get Mark Cuban interested in buying your package of OER? How would you get him to say, like, you know what, that's a great idea. I'm going to put a lot of money behind that. I'm going to buy every school in LMS that has a pipeline of OER coming into it. Thanks, Mark Cuban. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with our why. Kind of like, or redundant, but I want to use the Simon Sinek golden circle here to kind of really get to the point of thinking strategically about this concept. So the first thing we're going to talk about is why OER. And I'm just going to talk about 3 things that kind of are my whys in which we do this. So I want to really create ecosystems of equitable access to digital resources that are modifiable and shareable. When Christine and I were working at USDOE, this was our goal. A lot of people thought that we were, you know, in it to wage war against Pearson and McGraw-Hill and really take down the publishing companies and disrupt them. But what we were seeing out in schools is that there were 35, 40 kids in a classroom. They were using a science textbook that was 15, 20 years old. Some of those kids didn't even have access to a book. The pages were ripped out. The content wasn't even relevant. Some of the textbooks they had, you know, Ronald Reagan as the president. Actually, at this point, it wouldn't be a bad thing. And so that's where a lot of kids do, and that's their day to day. Okay, there's still, you know, I say it's still one of the greatest challenges in education is there's not equity across the board. There's not equity across the board. If you go and visit some of these schools and hear some of these stories that Christina and I had the chance to hear across the country, they're not there yet. Let's give creative content control back to educators. The educators are the most important investment in a school. They have been treated like people who aren't professionals for way too long. And this is our chance to really support and give teachers not only compensation, but resources to do this. And let's reinvest in the teaching profession by compensating educators for their curation work. So there's a lot of schools across the country that are doing this. They've shifted their models. They're using teacher on special assignment models where they're pulling teachers out of their regular classes for about a year or half a year. They're paying them a stipend. They're still under the district contract. And they're the ones that are actually doing the work, they're curating the work, and then they're taking that work and those ideas and presenting it to their peers. Indiana and Utah do this across the state. They have ambassadors. Vermont's doing this as well. They have ambassadors that are in their public schools across the state. Those folks are being, I think some of them are compensated. I don't know how that works, but regardless, they're teacher leaders. They're growing as leaders in their schools, and they're the ones that are coming back to present these ideas. So those are kind of some of the whys that I always think about, like I would like to see. So your conversation 1, and you can, somebody from your table, you guys can sit at different tables, you can mix together, however you want to do it. Why should your school district adopt open educational resources? So let's think of your why, and you can begin. And we can use the sketch pad, you can draw it out, you can write it out, however you want to do it.
Join.
You're not doing it.
Yeah.
I'm not.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah. Join you guys, there's one table.
Okay.
Just do one table.
Good super group? Yeah.
Super group, yes.
Super.
I think.
Do we hear our first singer?
Okay.
I put down my letter, yeah. always let me find something easy. Like this bubble.
Yeah.
That's, yeah.
This is it.
So it was like, in the warm weather.
Yeah.
Thanks, Anna. That's good.
I would like the flexibility. You have blind kids who don't want to carry a textbook. Sorry, you know, but.
Accessibility and convenience.
Right.
Mhm.
Sure.
Yeah, like to have the up-to-date information.
Right.
Out of date.
Replicability.
That's a fun word.
Any word in replicability. There's
Are they? Oh my gosh.
Are we gonna send this one?
They're Mr. Sketchy Skinnies. I didn't
No.
know that.
I don't know what you're talking about, but it's so good.
And we're now off task. We decided we're sticking with textbook and sticking to markers. Okay.
For this reason.
Something just good to know that, like, I knew the buzzword, I knew the acronym, and I sort of thought that I knew what it referenced. But I realized that when I was teaching, I was doing some of this anyway.
Sure.
But didn't have a name for it.
Sure.
Yep,
And probably most teachers do, right? So
Exactly.
I know that it's
Sure.
actually,
it's a thing.
right.
Yeah.
It's
That's
like
a
the
thing.
resources that are available to me in the locker, the book locker,
Sure.
are insufficient, and so I have to build something. Read a thing.
And that's interesting because in 2011 at Burlington, we tried to, when we brought the iPads in, one of the goals our superintendent had, he's like, hey, let's replace 12 textbooks in high school with OER. And we failed because the tools and a lot of the surrounding resources weren't created yet. Teachers were going to Google and just trying to find something, and they find like one PowerPoint. And they were doing a lot of piecemealing. I was looking for a lot of haystacks for a lot of needles. And so it wasn't all really curated in a lot of spaces. Second part of that is that in most of the public schools I've worked in, there is not a MLS certified librarian until kids reach high school.
Yep.
And that's probably one of the biggest problems that is not recognized or not talked about in K-12 education, because kids are going to a library from their most formative years and seeing it as a place where we go, where it's like I'm not in class,
Yeah,
or I'm check up, or this is where I just read, which reading is fine, but there's a lot more that goes on.
Yeah, and at the higher ed level, what has the OER conversations have whether you've seen most successful programs, you've seen things like, well, in Virginia, places like William and Mary and OEU has started something where they basically provide so faculty would propose, I'd like to create OER resources for this class, and then they would be paired with a research librarian, scholarly librarian, and then they would work over the course of the semester to build that up, and they be paid, not a huge amount, but they get a nominal sum of money to build that, and then it would be open available, go to the institutional repository and access to it. But that pairing with a librarian is incredibly important. Because it addresses a lot of those questions about validity, about trying to find sources, about does the librarians all know the copyright and fair use laws. And so I do think you do see a lot of pressure. You see that those are systems that work, but it's hard to scale them up, right? Because there's a finite number of librarians.
Especially in a pre-K-12 setting.
Absolutely, yeah.
I've learned as I've traveled the country, Nebraska was very fortunate for school accreditation purposes. They require one full-time librarian for every 250 students, which is unheard of across the country. Yeah. So, and I was fortunate enough to be the school library liaison at the state level, and I had them involved in a lot of conversations with teaching and learning, the subject matter experts, and pulled them in on a lot of projects. And then I traveled to Indiana, and they're like, "Oh my God, that sounds amazing.
Right.
We have one for like every 5 districts,
Right.
or California, or insert any other state there."
Yeah.
And so it's also, I know that it's not solely on the teacher librarians, but that is a huge part of their job is advocacy and saying we're not just the people that check out books. We do way more than that, and they're trained in curation, and they can be incredible assets in this world.
Right. This also speaks to the need the difference that state level policy makes for these conversations, whether it's mandating OER and then trying to figure out how to fund that, or mandating librarians, or right, these sort of, in some cases, those are unintended positive consequences
Yeah, sure.
of state level decisions. So,
Sure. It's interesting to see what words you have on here so far. You have accessibility, convenience, locally relevant or culturally relevant, up-to-date information. One that's not on here that I always get with district leaders, or the hook, is usually cost saving. Yeah, especially with building budget.
And that's something that has come up in the OER discussions in Virginia and everything. But the thing that a lot of people don't understand is that those cost savings are long term.
Sure.
You've got to put some big costs in up front to get things rolling.
Absolutely.
Because it's just not a matter of taking a whole bunch of PDFs and throwing them up online.
No, absolutely.
that's right.
It's a reinvestment back in the district.
Yeah. And unfortunately, the way most K-12 school systems work, they don't work on a long term. The system I used to work for was maybe a 2-year initiative or something, right? And it didn't work in 2 years. The next board came in and crossed it out and we tried something.
Yeah.
Based on the state 2-year budget.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah. And by any of the budgets matter.
Yep.
So.
But I mean, that's something that I think needs to be made very clear of if you're going to talk about any sort of cost savings.
Yeah.
And there is cost savings down the line.
Absolutely.
Sure.
And I think there also, this goes back to the storytelling, which I know is kind of just a common theme in education these days, but we have to tell the stories of districts that are making this work too. So Liberty Public Schools, which is right next door to North Kansas City that you were talking about earlier, they have the option for their district teams when they go to select new content or new resources. They say we'll call the publishing companies and have them send everything there. And you can look at that, or you can do OER. But it's not just you can do OER, you have to create a 3-year plan with this. And you are going to use the funds that you would have spent on the textbooks back on yourselves as a team. We want to see the professional learning that you're going to use. We've already got this approved by the board. It is written in, like this, the board has to approve it. So it's written in their budget. So that also holds their feet to the fire kind of thing, so that they can't go back on that and say, just kidding, we're not going to pay for that professional learning after all. It's actually approved by the board, and that is huge. So they have to see that long-term investment as well.
It is interesting hearing this conversation. You realize that, like, thinking back to your point, Tim, about the cost savings up front, and I almost wonder, like, if Apple and Google would have come up with this, or Microsoft would have come up with this, like how quickly, because we all rushed very quickly to buy Apple computers and iPads and Chromebooks, and we invested large amounts of money in thinking, how we're going to plan this out and investing in technology, which I feel is important. But I mean, this is one of those big ideas where we talk to a lot of schools that, I'm really interested now in their timelines and their roadmaps, because this is a strategic overhaul of a lot of different things.
Well, if you look at the marketing of the Chromebooks, all the marketing there that goes to look at all the free resources you can have with this inexpensive machine.
Great point.
The free resources are all coming through Google.
Yeah.
So how long are they going to be there, and who's going to maintain them? And,
it's also interesting to see that too, because I presented this idea at Sloan School. They had an open source conference there, primarily open source. code is software. And I keynote at the end of the day, and one of the guys that was like a founder of open source software was there in the audience, and all the questions were like, proprietary software. It's not open if you put it on Apple or Google or Chromebook. And I was like, okay, well, time out. And there's where I was like, open source software has a marketing problem in K-12 education, and probably in higher ed. I was like, yes, I'd love to not pay for programs or software. I'd love to go completely Linux and we develop everything in house. But again,
Sure.
Oh, our IT department got everything open source had security problems.
sure,
Yeah.
I mean, that's a whole other conversation. But
Yeah,
just
Also,
because-
I can barely get people to, release a textbook. I can't then say, oh, I'm just gonna take your Apple slides too. So it's, yeah.
okay, so any other we've already shared the why. Any other things about the why?
Well, I would
Yeah.
say it promotes through reflection and intentional planning
Yeah.
about why you do anything.
I think for parties,
What does this speak of?
Another thing is that right now, when you have a regular old textbook bought and given to the teacher feels that material is out of their control. And so you're actually giving them back more control
Absolutely.
if you've got something that they can actually go in and edit and fix.
So you're providing purpose and
Well,
motivation.
Yeah.
So your teachers
And on the
really
other
pay
end of
for
that,
the materials.
On the other end of that, though, there's a lot of teachers that would not want to do that because
Sure.
they like having the nice, neatly packaged,
Right.
materials here, and I
Yeah,
don't
so
have
for
to worry
them, it's
about
a
it.
convenience to have the book.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
But you want
And all the
teachers.
ancillary feature also to it.
Right, right.
So there's a teacher training aspect.
Yeah.
Well, and I want to point out that this is something that we're working with as we have teachers design courses. Not everybody's good at designing learning.
Yeah.
So you might be a great teacher,
Right.
but you might rely on resources of other people that provide you. So
You're good at presenting it, not necessarily creating.
exactly. So we have like a committee that vets the learning, and it's stressful. I mean, if you agree, we pay like $7,800 to create a whole course. And if you agreed to sign up for this, I mean, we keep sending it back and saying, no, this is just a web page full of resources.
Right.
You know, so it's really a problem.
Like it's
Yeah.
that's a really good point. And we have a mix of teachers at Worcester Academy that are, some have come up through education programs, teacher training programs, so they know how to not only, facilitate the content, but also how to manage the classroom, teach the whole child, and all those things. And we have other folks who didn't come up through that way. So really, going back to the instructional design process, I mean, how you really design and finding those few folks who can do that really well and have them go viral within your school, because that's important. Because going back to the quality piece of this, like we don't want to put this up against the textbook with all the ancillary pieces and the assessments and the packaging of nice shiny stuff, and then what we get on the other end is not good, because then all the parent voice is going to come in, the district voice, the committee, school committee voice, the board of trustees, and they're going to say, what is this, hack job that you just did? So that's another big thing. So this is the bigness of this is really it's a multi-pronged approach. It doesn't happen overnight. Many of the districts we talked to in 2015 who have made this transition, a lot of it started with personalized learning, blended learning, kind of PD within their schools, and this kind of percolated up to the top and fit in with what they were focused on in their why. So, just a few things to think about. All right, for time's sake, we're gonna move to our next conversation. How do we implement and scale OER? So we have our why. We know why we're here. We know why we want to do this. We've talked to the board. We've talked to the parents. We've talked to everybody, school committee, students. But okay, how do we do this? So conversation 2 is after reading through some of the OER stories, which is on the next slide. So if somebody has the slides up in front of you, those stories are clickable. Links built in the next slide. After reading through OER stories, how will you organize and implement your OER strategic plan? So thinking about these 4 districts, which are are all Go Open districts that Christine and I had the pleasure to work with. And we're doing some really great things, and then we curated their stories through the Office of Ed Tech. We have it's still there for now. The story engine.
Stop!
Pages are being redacted by the day on all the government web
They're
pages.
still there, just go with
They're
that.
still there. You print them out for posterity. And so these are all clickable. So these each will take you to a different school. So I'll do this for an example. So what this is you can start to see kind of just a quick story, kind of talks about their why, kind of why they decided to do this. So this is Bristol, Tennessee schools. They did a whole big overhaul with a lot of their stuff and kind of focusing on the future ready initiative and thinking about connectivity at all the schools. And Dr. Gary Lilly did a great job of partnering with foundations and local organizations to help make this a possibility. So just kind of click through some of those stories and then have a conversation on kind of the how you would implement this. Or you don't even have to look at the stories. You can just kind of talk and discuss at your table, how you think you would do this or how you've already maybe seen this done.
Oh, yeah. What you were just looking at it, yeah.
Yeah.
It's both super convenient. Graded math flexible.
Decided to change their approach to mathematics instead of having silos and algebra, geometry, and everything. More blended approach, which is something that we needed for
Teaching, yeah, pedagogy, yeah.
the textbooks, but we're never able to do that, right? No fun available.
Yeah.
The dichotomy that bothers me about this whole thing is that, we're not gonna buy textbooks, we're gonna buy laptops instead. What are we gonna do with those laptops? Don't have the materials to go with them.
Right.
Well, that makes me question accessibility a little bit, because, yeah, that's great if you have access.
But you have an
What have you
infrastructure.
done?
Yeah, you have
There's
to-
also, even in a rich county like mine, we have people who cannot afford home access. home internet
Yeah, that's
access.
right.
So,
And then that gives a disadvantage.
Absolutely, the digital divide is growing. So.
We actually have, well, we had one or two families that refused to allow their kids to access.
there are, those too, yes.
We have been warned by a law firm actually in the Philly area, Sweet Stevens, that at some point we're going to have to offer internet access with the device. We send the device home,
Right, that's what the hot spots.
and it's the students should do work that requires an internet connection. At some point in the future, a parent is going to say, bringing a third grade public education.
Right.
I know.
That's not an argument that would get thrown out quickly.
Right.
Like you might not win that case, but you certainly wouldn't get thrown out.
There are some districts in rural areas of Virginia where internet access is difficult to get
Oh, yeah.
at all. who are looking at actually building out.
Irish Circles District.
No, Iris in Charlottesville. They got plenty of internet.
Gotcha, okay.
And we're talking about out like in Wise County, which is the Appalachian section of the
Well, yeah, down in King George.
King George is another one, where the schools, along with the county government, are looking at building out their own internet backbone, just because nobody wants to service them out there reasonably priced anyway. I mean,
No, this is the rural electric cooperatives all over again in the 1930s, right?
Sure.
There's no for telephones, right? There's no reason, there's no funding reason for companies to go out there. So,
But there's really no reason why a county like the one I live in doesn't have a municipal Wi-Fi system or a municipal broadband system, other than the fact that they get sued too much before they ever got
Does that happen to Philly? I think Philadelphia.
So it's Philadelphia, that's right.
Yeah. Hotspots and Comcast,
Right.
Sued.
What was it, I think it was
Verizon.
Knoxville, Tennessee or something was in the same boat. They wanted to build out a municipal broadband system and it passed a law in Tennessee that said they couldn't do it. Guess who paid for that law? Anyway, we're off topic.
Yeah, we are. I mean, I think part of the challenge about OER is that the playing field is so unequal between publishers and schools.
Yes.
Right? I mean, I think, and that's the same sort of thing. Like Verizon and Comcast are in such a different playing field than municipalities or school systems which are trying to push forward something they see as valuable.
And on the other end of things, the textbook industry is easy, let's put it that way. It's an easy solution for a school system. It may not be cheap, but it's easy.
Yeah.
Right.
It's also, it goes back to tradition. This is a process that is steeped in tradition.
Sure.
It's time for a new ELA series. We call the publishing companies, they send us their stuff, we try to look through it, we get the teachers in there, may or may not listen to what they say. We decide, we buy, we put it in our classrooms.
I've sat on textbook adoption.
Yeah. And if you have no marketing around this as an option, then how do districts know that this is an option, especially in more rural settings, where they may rely on more of a co-op or a consortium model, where they pull 25 nearest through their service agencies or whatever. But even then, if they don't know that it's an option, they don't know that it's an option.
Right, yeah, that's right, yeah, absolutely.
It's moved to
Now, it's a little bit
Microsoft.
now, yeah.
It's moved to
Right.
Microsoft now.
Yeah.
Well, I think in thinking through the kind of the how, and you might have noticed in some of the stories, but a lot of them, it wasn't we're gonna do this all in the next 5 years. It was, they found the stuff like logical, pragmatic entry points for it, and then they were able to then kind of build that out. So I think that's kind of thinking through the how of all this is a good kind of way to do this, because when we look at a lot of districts, like it's not going to be like rolling out technology. It's not going to be a quick thing where you take the iPad out of the box and magic happens, or you can really kind of shift things. So it's a really different way of thinking, like, what can we do? What resources do we have? What capacity do we have? And really going through all those questions. And it requires having a team of people that know this stuff and understand it. Even including some dissenters and thinking, like, why this is probably won't work.
Yeah.
I always think of Lincoln's team of rivals. Like, let's surround ourselves with some people who are going to challenge us, not keep us from our goals, but challenge our thinking. All right. So what will you do to support implementation of OER? So there's a really great district, Coronado Unified School District, who put together a strategic plan. Again, this is a clickable link that you can click, and I'll just bring it up here. They actually, it's one of the better plans I've seen, and they kind of start with their whole proposal, talk about their school district. They do an overview of what OER is. kind of their why, what they're involved in, why use open educational resources, their implementation, what they're going to do. And then it gets down into what I really like is this is their timeline. It's very thorough. Year implemented. They have the past pieces that they did to kind of put this in place, and they go down the line. Project, year implemented, and then they have the next steps directly over here. Very thorough. The other piece that I really like is they looked at the roles they have in their school, and they broke it down into role, duties, and they actually have compensation here. Who's going to get paid for doing this work? So this is a great way of kind of, I work with a lot of schools, and I say one of the things that look at this and kind of don't take it word for word, but take pieces of it, because they were very thorough about kind of their what and their who, and realizing that this is a team effort. This is a overall universal effort within a school. They talk about their budget, their technology support, housing and delivery, like kind of where this is going to be, infrastructure, virtual data storage. So all these pieces have to come into place. It's very thorough. So it's roughly a 12-page document. But this is a school that if they brought this to a board or a committee, I mean, there'd probably be a lot of questions. But at the same time, like they've done their homework, so they know how to really do this. They have the human element assessed, and they have the overall district assessed. They talk about specifics. And I don't know where they are right now. I'm trying to get in touch with them, but I think they're probably moving pretty far ahead. So
I sometimes, though, this is my cynical stuff coming out here. I look at this kind of askance because they have, about 25,000 students in their system, something like that.
25,000 people.
Yeah, I would say it's.
Okay, population of
If
25,000.
you go back from the top, I think it's.
So the schools are,
Yeah, population is 25,000.
Yeah.
4,500
31,
students.
yeah,
45.
yeah, 3,100 go to, yeah.
We have high schools with 4,500 students.
Sure.
Sure, sure.
And so how does that scale to a larger system?
well, a lot of the Florida schools that have 130,000 across the district. I think the school that use the Eureka map.
There's a bunch of them. Sorry,
One of the big districts in
Broward County.
30,000 would be
Yeah, I
Broward
think
or.
Broward County.
Yeah, I think it's Broward County,
Yeah.
and they weren't a one-to-one district. They didn't have a lot of technology infrastructure, and they printed all of the Eureka map and then remixed it for their own, aligned it with their curriculum. It got some controversial reviews from parents and it wasn't well received. A lot of people liked it, but they normally would have spent I think $10 million on a math curriculum. They got this for free because it carries a non-commercial license, and they printed out all the math. And it cost them $3 million, and they yielded a cost savings of $7 million. So I completely agree. It's not a one-size-fits-all, and as you scale up, there's been a lot of success and talk about this in Rhode Island and Delaware. It's small states. They're two small states, so they have, they can do it on a very small scale. But I talked to Chris Lehman and the superintendent here, Phil Height in Philadelphia here. And I'd like to see a big city district take on something like this. And so San Francisco Unified is another big city district. And thinking like those are the schools that if they can start to do it and implement it and create a plan, that could be game changing.
Well, and I'm wondering why some of these large districts don't pool their resources to try to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'll go back to my district.
Yeah.
And we spend a hell of a lot of money every year on just writing supplements to textbooks.
Yeah.
The summer curriculum programs is a lot of money, a lot of effort, a lot of people.
Yeah.
And I just keep thinking, why aren't we putting those resources into something permanent like this rather than something that's really not going to last longer than the textbook?
It's interesting when you see, I'm curious about whether you see states getting more top-down about this over the next few years? Because certainly in the higher ed market, and the factors are different, right? Parents are complaining to legislators about the cost of health. So
And
that's
you've got legislation that's
Right.
happening.
right. So right, but it's California and Texas. And
New one was just introduced this past week in Hawaii.
Yeah.
It actually mandated.
Yeah, so I've been waiting for that to actually OER.
It would mandate that all faculty members use OER, and
Oh, I
if it doesn't exist, that they would then be required to create it.
Yeah.
So are
So
they
we're
going
not necessarily supporting that one, because we don't want it to be a mandate.
are they going to fund it too?
That is to be determined. That would have to be appropriated. And Texas actually just passed something in July
Right.
that appropriated 20 million for the development of more ELA stuff.
That's a weekend, mandates without funding.
Right, and then the Virginia Community College system got a mandate, so.
Yeah, of course. Tidewater kind of.
Yeah, right. They're like, yeah, well, Tidewater's like, look, you
Tidewater
can
is
do
a
it,
little
and everybody
different,
else
yeah.
signed, and so the legislators said, great, so now everybody will do it.
I know.
Yeah, so I'm just curious about what you think, look, there's two pieces of it.
Yeah.
You answered part of it already, but, do you see more states mandating this, not just in higher ed, where, again, the drivers are different, but in K-12, and it's not a good thing.
I'm gonna go with no. And the reason I say that is because departments of education at the state level really strongly believe in local control.
Right.
So there are only a few that actually make the recommendations of textbooks that they have to choose, or there's a textbook list. Texas and Oklahoma being the largest ones. California and Florida also have lists, recommended lists. You can opt out or you can submit a waiver, things like that. But I still don't think local control is going to supersede this unless there are huge legislative changes coming from your education committees.
Yeah.
I don't foresee that.
And I think it's interesting because Edweek Smart Brief had an article out last week about this DOE is trying to find is trying to find a long-term partner for the Go Open initiative that Christine and I worked on. And funny, we talked about this almost simultaneously, and I started writing a response blog post to it. Because ultimately, we never saw Go Open. Go Open is an idea and a movement. It wasn't supposed to be a clearinghouse for any of that stuff. And so I think we saw it as eventually the states are going to take ownership of this. And Christina, when she came on, she did a lot of work directly with the states in trying to get those state chiefs to kind of come together, share in community practice, and actually understand what these terms are. A lot of them didn't. And so I don't think mandate is the right word, but supporting districts that are, and we had some states that were really angry with us that we started with the districts first and the proof points and said, wait, I didn't even know they were going to this event and they're in my state. And I'm like, well, maybe you're out of touch with what's going on. And so you might want to put a glass to the wall.
I'm sure that helps.
Yeah. We didn't say it like that. It was kind of muffled conversation. But
in our state,
Yeah.
they're really not moving very quickly with this. They're doing a lot of,
For the K-12.
well, at least, okay, I don't know what's
Yeah.
going on in college, but I know as far as the K-12 use of OER, they do all these presentations and discussions and don't do anything with any of the feedback that we give them, things like that, so.
Are you part of the Go Open BA team?
No, I'm not part of the team. I work with the state ISTE affiliate.
Yeah.
And we have a small committee in there that's trying to
Got it.
advise, suggest,
Yeah.
get involved in it that way.
Okay.
So
Okay.
it's nothing official. And sometimes they welcome us and sometimes
I
they
know.
don't.
Just knowing that state in particular, they've been really hung up on the infrastructure piece
Right,
and the repository in particular.
right.
And so that has been their stalwart right now.
Yeah, they're trying to build the warehouse before I can put it in.
Sure.
So, exactly, we've had that discussion.
And if you look at the rollout of ESSA as well, I mean, there are actually provisions and language in there for supporting open educational research.
We're tracking
Right?
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know where, I haven't really followed along recently, but I know it's in there. I've read the bill, and that's our law, and it's really giving the idea of having the federal government less involved and having the state, kind of determine their own measures and their own success, like, that's, I think, a good thing, to really get the feds out of it, and give more autonomy to the states.
Time check, we got 20
Time
minutes.
check, all right, so we're gonna bring it all together. We don't have to go through this. This is, designed for a, a Christine style session, busting on the doors, so I just get the, so kind of what we're gonna do is, schedule a timeline, and, you can use, again, the great thing about this presentation is, again, you can use it if you wanna take it to your school, if you wanna run through this with your board, if you wanna run through this, with this kind of workshop with faculty, staff, people we work with. It can serve as a good kind of conversation starter, and kind of get some people thinking. We're going to do this Shark Tank pitch. So, and I think we kind of already got through this. Now that you have a plan and a roadmap and seeing others' plans, what challenges do you anticipate along the way? I think we've talked and we've addressed a lot of those challenges. There are always going to be challenges with a lot of these things, especially with open educational resources, because schools are the same. We have a lot of work to do. We need to get people who manage the economics of school to think differently and reappropriate money and create new line items and new systems, so that it can happen and it can be fluid.
I'd also add to that, there's no definitive way of doing it.
No, there's no road.
We did work for the federal government.
Mhm.
So we couldn't hold people accountable, say, you must do this or you mandate it a certain way. Or hold them accountable to say, you signed on to this, what have you done?
Yeah.
So we can tell stories. So I would say there's no right or wrong way to do this. Right now is actually a really good time in the school year to start finding resources like you just found right here, to pull in supplementally and then really focus on it during the summer, and then be ready to try a unit or something next school year. And we've seen it done really fast, and we've seen it done stretched out over 1 year, 2 years, even longer.
Yeah.
So I worked with Oxnard Union High School District, just outside of LA, and I met their assistant superintendent at Q in March last year. They were getting ready to implement NGSS, and they figured out they were gonna have to flip their biology from 10th grade down to 9th grade. And they were going to have to purchase 1,000 new textbooks. But they didn't want to purchase new textbooks because they weren't NGSS aligned. So they decided that they were going to try OER. They got together for 2 weeks. It was a boot camp over the summer. They had this team of teachers. They found the CK12 Flexbook. They customized it to their scope and sequence. They made sure the vocabulary aligned. And they printed and they implemented this year. That's a sprint. Like, that is not common by any means.
How many,
but it is still possible
how
to
many
do.
teachers were involved in that?
There's about 10 of them. But the cool thing is, because I got to go see them and like hang out with them for the day, you had a 30-year veteran teacher sitting next to a newly graduated teacher that was going to be joining them that year and was trained in NGSS. And they were sitting next to each other going, we could do this, and then this, and this, and then they were putting the things together, which was really cool to see. Yeah?
I have also like specific questions. What's the copyright risk that schools can run into? Like, what have you seen in terms of like real oh-shit moments?
Specifically it was around media use. It's really easy to do a reverse Google image search, and copyrighted stuff can pop up really easily. So you can find any page where a copyrighted image or video sits, and more companies are paying for that to happen. So you can outsource that pretty easily. So then you get trolls that will send you cease and desist letters with fines.
How do you do that?
I'll show you. The reverse image search, yep. So there were 3 districts that I worked with in the state of Nebraska that got cease and desist letters for images, copyrighted images that were sitting on their school websites. And they ranged in fines, depending on what it was, from anywhere from like $1,500 to $5,000. It was a small district, and $5,000 fine was a huge chunk of their budget. And then they had to pay a lawyer and like all of those extra things.
Did they pay the bonds?
They negotiated. They did negotiate, but then you had to pay the lawyer's fees to actually handle the negotiation too. I know. This is what I'm saying. that's why when we talk about copyright and fair use and things like that, we used to just be able to share things across the hall and it wasn't that big of a deal. But when we go digital, fair use thing, even though we're using it for educational purposes, it's not as clearly defined. So that's where you really have to be careful. Now, if it's hidden behind a login, like in an LMS, it's different than if I just put it on my teacher website. Again, gray areas.
But then it's not open.
Exactly.
And on the other side of that, there's good examples of districts coming after teachers who are violating their contract with the union contract because they're using either taxpayer money or time or resources to build stuff and then go out and sell them on something like teachers.
That's happening in our
Yeah.
district. We have our own little internal, it's a database of resources and things like that.
Sure.
And some teachers have taken, they've actually written their own lessons to put in there, and
Yeah.
they've taken those lessons and tried to sell them. The district said, nope, you wrote them for us.
Yeah.
And,
Work from it. But,
That comes back to some policy changes at a district level. too.
that's caused an awful lot of
property.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And some districts I've talked to, like, they don't even know what IP is, they don't even know if they have it in their contract. And so that's a big issue, and a lot of districts really need to understand that and have, I refer a lot of people that ask me about that. There's, she does work at Meredith
Very
Jacobs.
big, yeah.
She's a
Creative Commons USA.
IP wonk. She taught that. She taught and she worked for CC Creative Commons USA. And I think she's a good person to talk to because you're going to hear two different things if you just go to like your district lawyer or somebody who doesn't really know this. I mean, we had this last year. We were building online courses at our school, and we talked to our school lawyer, and she came back with all this legal stuff that basically said like teachers were going to never going to be able to use this work ever again, and they have to buy it from the school and license it from the school. And I said, time out. Nope, that's not how we're going to work here.
Yeah.
So we got it to the point where the school retains and owns the copyright of the work, but we're also putting a Creative Commons license on it to allow teachers to go use that and remix it. And so they incorporate a CC BY license on it. So that covers most of the bases. And Meredith was instrumental in helping us kind of navigate that.
Yeah, ours is a non-exclusive copy.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but the teacher can take it.
I think that's
Yeah.
that's the term.
Yeah, the advantage of being a state institution, the Attorney General of Virginia is our lawyer. And so actually,
No big
we
deal.
don't pay fines on things like that. We just take down stuff. Like when stuff's posted and they have like it's educational, nobody's making any money off it, go away. And so, but that's an advantage that when you have a whole bevy of education lawyers and IP lawyers in your office, you can just
That's
say,
true.
go away. Like the negotiation was, yeah, we took it down. You're right.
Yeah.
One
There's
small,
no damage.
Yeah.
one small thing that they did for a curriculum project in science in our district, though, was they went and took their own pictures.
Yeah.
Go out and if you need a picture of a beaker, go take a picture of a beaker.
Yep.
you know, that-
Right.
So,
But by default, that's copyrighted.
well, it was done by the system, that way they didn't have to pay anybody else, they didn't have to risk bringing something in
Sure.
from someplace else and somebody else claiming a copyright on it.
Although you remember the woman that took she was in an airplane about like 5-6 years ago, and she took a picture of like a rocket going up through the clouds, like as she was like in her
Right, yeah.
And all of a sudden she shared it out on social media and then it showed up on the nightly news, and she's like, "Hey, where are my royalties?" Like, I have a copyright.
Well,
And the news just ran with it because it was out on social media, so she kind of gave that
Yeah.
over.
And that happened a lot a few years ago, but these days, it's a lot of people that are very savvy. If they put something on Instagram, they know that, that somebody
Sure.
else takes it, they can sue them.
Sure.
So that's happening a little bit less.
Adam?
Are there resources that are considered open educational resources that are provided by companies or even if they're nonprofit?
Sure. Yeah, it really varies. We kind of talk, it's more of a continuum, I would say. You have individual resources, but you have openly licensed textbooks, openly licensed courses. And so you can piecemeal those resources together into playlists and units of study. But then you have full curricula that already exists that's openly licensed. Business model that's been built around that are in the wraparound services. So the professional development and the printing. So Eureka Math, for example, are the ones that built Engage New York's content, but they've spun off on their own because they now provide printing and professional development. And then Open Up Resources is probably the newest player in the game, and they have 6-8 Math that they've procured from Illustrative Math, and then they're working on English Language Arts right now. But the big news this past week is, if you're familiar with Ed Reports, they are a third-party reviewer of curriculum and instructional materials, and they just reviewed Illustrative Math, 6-8 Math, and it came back with some of the highest marks that have actually ever happened in any series, which speaks volumes to obviously help support OER.
Are there ever, like, with a digital only resource, are there ever privacy concerns with products that are considered open? I'm just thinking, like, a lot of people, when you say free, it triggers like a, I'm not paying for it, but I'm the product.
Yeah.
reaction. So I'm just wondering if that's a concern.
I don't have any examples offhand, and a lot of it is, you know, as a tech director, it's one of the things that keeps me up at night, always, and just making sure that all the systems and all the platforms we have in place are protecting student privacy and their data. And you know, so ultimately, it's kind of like looking at your housing systems for the login. You have to understand what information they're giving over, especially depending on what age they are. That's where it's really important to make sure you understand that piece. As far as consumers of something that's open and free, bringing that into it, it's like, you know, the kids aren't signing into a portal and giving over their birth date and their name and their email address, especially if they're under the age of 13. You know, it's a violation of COPPA, and then that they might be giving over information to this entity that's using their information and selling it.
Right, or they go out of business and then
Yeah.
the only asset they have is your student data.
So I just want to, maybe it's on the next slide or something, but you have like a comprehensive or a basic list of some of the resources we've been talking about.
I do.
You do, yeah. I have one. I built out a slide deck that was all content via called math, science, English, and different OER resources. I don't have that on here, but we'll make sure
I'll
you
add
get to it. Okay. This I just wanted to really quickly share. In a few weeks, I'm going to start sending out every other week a newsletter that's kind of a roundup and a curation of articles about OER, different resources that are out there or developing, different policy articles of things that are happening, and some great stories about.
Because we're nerds like that.
Because we're nerds. Curation, we're creators by definition. So every 2 weeks I'll send this out, and it's just your basic email newsletter, and it's going to be chock full of resources. And early on I was talking about Participate Author. This is the course I just built, designing and leading engaging OER ecosystems. Now I warn you ahead of time, it does come at a cost. And I say that because a lot of people, when you're talking about something being open, they're like, well, everything has to be open. I'm working on a book with Dave Burgess about this. And he was nervous, and he said, well, how are we going to sell a book that's championing open and free and this great marketplace? And I said, yes, but we're not. Educators still going to buy books. They're going to go to Amazon. They're going to buy books because they love reading, they love learning, they love following authors and this and that. I was like, that's not the root of what we're talking about. What we're talking about is the big picture, the big wholesale end of it. When thinking about the textbook companies, and really not just pushing back against them, but almost forcing them to change their model, because they can be a real asset in all this. Right. So this course is a self-paced course. This is kind of designed for if a lot of districts want to kind of have a PLC or a PLG around something like this. They can all take it at the same time. You get a badge within the Participate community for completing the course, and so you could then show that to your district and potentially get some continuing education credits for it. That's a little bit about why it comes at a cost. I mean, it's $60, so it's it's pretty good cost. They asked me how much I should make it, and I was like, I don't know, like $8 or something. But it kind of takes you through
$5.
$5. $5.36 for tax in Delaware. So.
You take Bitcoin.
Oh no, don't go down there. Are you doing a Bitcoin session tomorrow? I don't understand that at all. So it kind of takes you through, like, what OER is, it kind of defines it, it identifies pieces of it, talks about Creative Commons. I did screencasts where I'm talking over slide decks, and then there's also a bunch of resources built in the course that you can take with you at home. So,
Will you hit refresh on that really fast?
Mhm.
I dropped that in, so the
Oh, okay.
list is in there now on that same slide.
Great. So if you got the slide deck, you will have that.
35.
Oh, thank you. Yes, thank you.
Okay, so there, yeah, Christina added that. Thank you. Love to move slides.
I no longer work for the federal government, so I can't actually endorse content.
I know, that's fun. Remember we had to hire tons? So thank you all for sharing. I think this was a great conversation. I kind of sometimes like when it's smaller because we can really have a good discussion. And so if you want to get in contact with either of us, our contact info is on the last slide. Please feel free to ever, reach out to either of us or tweet at us in some way, shape, or form. So thanks again for your ideas, your thoughts, and your conversation. Thanks.
You want me to show you how to do it?
Yes.
Okay. Your version is very short.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Right, yeah. Correct. Oh, okay. Got it. So when you have, you can just go to Google, but I can just whenever you have the,
Thank you.
drag and drop it.
Right. I've heard of this people using this on like.
Yeah.
Tim and
like
Jack.
accent H or whatever. So, and this is the devices that is a little different.
If it does happen, here's the path out, yes.
Yes.
State
Now
mandates that
all the
school,
different,
higher ed,
all of the
textbook.
different websites.
Higher ed, we pass up these off.
Now you're the one thing.
They do it right, they will have a centralized clearinghouse, they'll provide infrastructure to help at least have some kind of, and actually, the CCS already has. We're learning our.
Foundation.
Indeed, yeah, that's what I mean, yeah, exactly, so there's a state wishes for that, they create a set of resources, and then they model it out. That's right, absolutely, that's why I think, that's build the infrastructure for the higher ed level, but there's no reason that infrastructure couldn't also become, right? It starts with AP classes, and the enrollment classes, and the IB classes, they're using similar texts.
Well, these are all openly licensed, so I'm good with it.
Oh, yeah, right.
They do
So did you present this at Florida?
Yeah, right. A little different because this
But
only 40 minutes.
Oh.
So that was more just kind of like sitting inside.
if you're doing video,
Yeah, I mean, the material.
I'm very happy.
Right, right?
I make creative and stuff.
Right?
Videos all
All
the
the
time.
time came back to this.
I have no idea.
Plans, like,
Oh, yeah, that was 5 years ago.
that's great. That's, supporting the US. And like raise around,
We can talk more about that.
Yeah, and how and when you use technology.
Right.
Those kinds of things.
You get to talk about it. I just want to talk about it.
Do whatever Jen says.
We
We usually do just sort of hang out and grab a little something.
actually, and then we go there and have college. We go there, and then move up to Boston. Kind of an important, so, but, it's kind of hanging come back.
Yeah,
So,
a long time.
it was, yeah, and I think a lot of.
They do.
They
They have really good pests, like really large pests.
So, you know. So.
I was in Omaha, taught in Omaha, and then I worked in Lincoln when I was up to state. Yes.
Graduated from Bellevue High School.
Did you really?
But with one Bellevue High School.
Oh my gosh. I was saying, so it would have been the original East.
Yes.
Yeah. That's amazing. Were you there because you had parents on base?
Yeah, my dad was actually born in Omaha.
Okay.
But we were stationed in Omaha.
An office,
So
okay.
I graduated, spent 1 year at like graduate university in Omaha. The first 2 years that it was University of Nebraska.
Okay.
The year before.
That's awesome.
Way
That's
before-
so cool.
Way before you.
Oh, yeah.
Category, yeah.
Oh, it's so nice to meet you. Yes, you are.
Because we realized,
I'm not really.
coded sort of terminology.
You're gonna love working with me.
Just the basics of how hiring is set up. What's the difference between that?
Yes, we tend to do that ourselves.
But that's exactly, exactly, which is something that my brother's always says.
Yeah, so I, yeah, I've never
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
This was a fun conversation.
What is my relationship?
Home for some of it, but also
That is,
momentum building.
as we know, the biggest growth there.
Specifically focused on pre-K 12. That was
And so.
I work literally around the corner from the White House, so that's difficult physically. It's very difficult to see what's happening.
Amazing how.
Yeah, right.
There are 150 local appointees.
It's transformative in California, once you have to change.
And so, well, I mean, yes, because their whole thing of all of the things that they've done is just to undo everything that was done in the last administration. So
They ask us.
if they had more people, maybe they could do more, and that scares me a little bit. So, but there's just, we came in, we were like towards the end of the administration, so it was a well-oiled machine. We had everyone in place, you got things done, it was a certain process, and we moved forward. And then
Right.
I was there for 3 months into the administration, bridge administration. And I tell you what, January 23rd was an entirely different time. And it was like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
I mean, it was in little things, like when you walk in, there are food
Right.
entries and their front desk and they have TVs and everything's switched over.
Yeah, right.
Churning out first generation graduates.
No, although, I think there's a little bit, the Venn diagram overlaps a little bit with those schools that have lots of transfers. Right, so you're looking at 4-year institutions that have passed for.
I'm at Beth's younger birthday.
Right, so George Mason is very much.
There's not a lot there.
Virginia has.
I know, no, I know, but it's just, so I guess the good thing is that based off of her, like, the profile of her, was that she basically figured out. So, because now I'm just working with staff, and their budget, they would want here, is not gonna happen.